The creators at Grounded believe that brewing great coffee shouldn't be a shot in the dark, and we couldn't agree more. Use the coupon code TheCoffeePodcast for 10% off Grounded at groundedcoffeebook.com. Our friends at Map It Forward are hosting 2 events we think you might be interested in: how to map a successful career as a barista, and how to map a successful career in business as a coffee roaster. Use the coupon code TheCoffeePodcast for 10% off your ticket. Remember, you can attend virtually. The following conversation is a living continuum that includes every link of the coffee value chain, from before the seed to after the cup. I'm Jesse Hartman, and this is the Coffee Podcast. Most who roast coffee rely on other members of the supply chain to export their coffee. To give us a little more perspective on the topic, we have our guest, Alejandro Cadena.
My name is Alejandro Cadena. I am Colombian. I'm based in Bogota, and I am the CEO of Carola Coffee, which is a green coffee company that is based at origin. And we've been in business for over 17 years now.
Alejandro, why did you choose the coffee industry, and what is your experience in it?
That's a great question. I must say that I did not choose the coffee industry. The coffee industry chose me.
Right on.
Because I was working in banking when I started, at Carola. I was one of the founders, but I was supposed to be just an investor. I had a, nice job in the city of London working in an investment bank. And I just wanted to continue doing that for as long as I could remember. I wanted to be a banker, so I was in my dream job anyway. And one day, one of my college friends invited me to be part of Vermax, which was the name that we were founded. And he was doing tropical fruits at the time, and he wanted to divest into other stuff. Basically, the idea was to import to the UK tropical fruits or any other Latin American product.
Okay.
And so, being Colombian, and I'm being Colombian, he thought of coffee as one of those products that would be interesting to import. So, yeah, that made a lot of sense. The fruit business was quite interesting. The margins were great, but it was very, very risky because, of course, we're talking fresh produce. So,
right.
Once in a while, your cargo would arrive rotten to London, and you'd have to incinerate it. So it not only would cost you the cargo, but also the incineration and all the paperwork necessary.
Right on, yeah.
It was an exciting thing to do, but probably not the best thing you could be doing at the time. It's pretty high risk. So he wanted to divest and do something else, and so he thought of coffee. And Gotcha. My dad at the time worked at the National Coffee Federation, the FNC, and he knew that. So he said, you should know a lot about coffee. And I said, well, you're talking to the wrong person. I'm actually a banker, so I have no idea about coffee. I know some things, but, I'm not the person to talk about coffee. And so he said, well, your father should know people or somebody. I said, well, actually, I don't think my dad knows a lot about trading coffee because he's a PhD in plant pathology. So I don't think he knows anything about trading coffee, but I do have another friend that used to work at the FNC, and maybe we can talk to him. And so that's how it all started, and that was 2001, kind of summer 2001. Gotcha. And at the end of 2001, after the dot-com burst, the investment banking industry had a big issue, and they were laying off people, and so I wanted to do an MBA and said, well, it's kind of the best time to go do an MBA. There's not a lot of things to do. They're laying off people. If I get laid off, I can get a good severance package, tax-free. So, hey, why not take the advantage? And so I got fired from the bank.
Right on.
And my idea was to go back to London in September of 2002 and start my MBA. And so I said, well, I'll go back to Colombia for a few months. It's cheaper to be there than here in London. I can, take advantage of the time and, just have fun before I started my MBA. So I went back to Colombia, and we had already started working with some exporters at the time. and had a couple of people working for us in Colombia, but they turned out to be really bad employees.
Oh, no.
So there I was in Colombia. We had to fire our employees, and I was the only one in Colombia. So basically, I had to take over the business.
Wow.
And so that's when I basically started to learn more about coffee, and visiting farms and really trying to develop a supply chain. Initially with the exporters, but we soon realized that we weren't getting anywhere with the exporters, the incumbent exporters in Colombia. They were not really very interested in specialty coffee. For them, it was, that's every time we find a great lot, a lot that cups really well after milling, that's what we offer as specialty. So it was kind of like finding a needle in a haystack.
Yeah.
It was more about luck than really, working to develop the supply chain. And we soon realized that if we didn't work directly with producers, we weren't going to get very far.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it was very illuminating, really getting to know the coffee industry from the other side, because I knew what a coffee plant was, and I had pretty good knowledge about the tree itself.
Right, and your dad studied plant pathology, so he understood that very well, right? Is that something y'all discussed? Or?
Sure. Well, I spent a lot of my summers at Sunny Cafe with the research center where he was the director. Gotcha. And so I didn't do any research. I was kind of helping out in the IT department and sometimes in some labs. But I wasn't very fascinated about the coffee industry. That was my dad's thing. And I always wanted to be a banker, so I always neglected coffee. Even though I say that, I was raised up because of coffee, all my studies and all I am today, I do really owe it to the coffee growers, because they were the ones that actually paid my dad for his salary.
Right.
So it was kind of a deja vu kind of thing, because I came back to the coffee industry at a different level than my dad, now in the trading part of the business. And it was really fascinating to really see how coffee growers in Colombia were anxious to do something new. They had very little chances of succeeding in life. They actually thought the coffee, all the coffee that was produced in Colombia was the same. They were paid the same, irrespective of quality. So for their minds, it was all the same. But it wasn't. And they were basically not getting the full picture, because nobody was telling them the quality that they produced. So there was no incentive for quality. And even though there were farmers that did a better job, they were not paid a higher price. And so we soon realized that the problem lied in the way the coffee was traded in Colombia. And this was really quick. I came back to Colombia in February 2002. And by April, I was already, illuminated by the problems. I studied economics, so this was very evident for me that there was an issue with the pricing structure.
Okay.
If farmers didn't get paid more for quality, there was no incentive for them to produce quality, and it would be very difficult to get a consistent quality. There was basically, like I said before, it was finding a needle in a haystack.
It was guessing, right? Or it was luck, like you said.
Yeah. So it was very illuminating. Like I said, I didn't know anything about coffee, so I really had to start learning. And I remember that we initially wanted to work with big farmers, the state coffees of Colombia, but it was so difficult. It was really difficult for them. It was a volume business, and it was not very profitable back then. We're talking, early 2002, when the coffee prices were 42 cents a pound.
Right.
So it's a hard time for farmers. And so we decided to go to the SEA. The SEA at Anaheim that year, May 2002. And because, said we need to learn. And, we're not going to learn a lot if we're here in Colombia. We need to learn what the industry is looking for.
Gotcha.
So we went to the SEA in Anaheim. And it was great because we got to meet a lot of people. And the nicest thing is that we got to meet a lot of coffee producers.
Right on, yeah. Going to the expo? Or?
Yeah, we went to the expo. And so one day we bumped into one of the exporters in Colombia that we had been trying to work with. And he presented us one of the coffee farmers that they were working was the president of the Fair Trade Co-op.
Got you.
In Huila. And I had never been to Huila in my life. I had been to Caldas and Visaralda, the coffee belt. That's where, the good coffee came, right?
Right,
so
right.
Trying to find good coffee. And then, all of a sudden I meet a farmer from Huila who was very confident about his coffee quality and his members. He was the president of an association of farmers that was a fair trade co-op. Gotcha. And he was really confident about the coffee quality that they had. And it really surprised me because, this was, a farmer small scale farmer from Huila. And he said, you know what, I really like what you're trying to do. We told him that we're trying to do quality and really pay higher prices to the farmers and create a very transparent and fully traceable supply chain. Back then, not a lot of people were talking about that. And so he said, you know what, I'll send you samples. When we went back to Colombia, he sent us samples. And I cupped them. I was just learning to cup. And they were the best coffee that I had tasted. And I wasn't a cupper back then. I was just starting to cup. But it was evident that there was a huge difference between what I had cupped before and that coffee.
Gotcha.
And it was beautiful coffee. And so I told him, can you send us another sample? I didn't tell him how good it was. I just
right.
said,
yeah, you don't want them to know necessarily at that point.
Right. And so I asked him for another sample, and the second sample was even better.
Yeah, because it's not too hard to pick apart some really great beans and send a sample, right? And
right. And I didn't drink coffee, to be honest. I was never a coffee drinker before then. I thought I was a lousy cupper because, I never drank coffee. Could have been a lousy cupper. But it turned out to be a pretty good one, in all honesty. I think I was that really helped, not a coffee drinker, because my palate was kind of clean.
Right.
Certainly, the quality of coffee that you usually drink in Colombia and back then was not very good. Anyway, so I didn't have any preconceptions about coffee, and I think that really helped.
Yeah, it sounds like your palate was kind of unbiased.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we sent the sample to another guy that we had met at the expo. A coffee importer from the States. He said, hey, I really like what you do. And we're actually looking for something like that from Colombia. And so we sent them the sample that we had received from this farmer. And like 2 weeks later, they said, we love the coffee. We want to buy it.
Well, good deal.
We were like, oops, what are we getting into?
Right.
We could import to the UK because we had a company in the UK, but
right.
we couldn't do anything in the US. And I said, well, let's see what they offer. And I said, we're interested in 4 containers.
Oh, wow. Geez, 4 containers?
Yep.
Wow, that's... What a surprise for y'all, huh?
Yeah, and so they said, well, what's the price and what shipment months are you offering? So we agreed on a price, we agreed on some months, and then, we signed a contract. So basically less than 2 months after we had been to the SCA, we had already sold our first 4 containers.
Wow.
But we didn't have an export license in Colombia.
Oh, good deal.
So, we started trying to work with some of the exporters that we knew, and none of them wanted us to be involved. So they said, hey, we'll do it. But, we'll pay you a commission. And I said, well, no, that's not what we want.
Right.
So we had to set up our own export company, which was not in the plans. By then I was supposed to be in London Business School doing my MBA. So of course I had to postpone my MBA.
Right.
And so, the rest is history, I guess. We're here almost 17 years later.
So you got your MBA, just not, the paper to prove it, sort of. That's what it sounds like.
That's right. And, when I told my dad that I wasn't going to do my MBA, he was really upset. And now I think he's okay with it.
I think after that first 4 containers, you could say, hey, there's a future here, right? I mean, 4 containers, that's a big deal for a first sell, right?
Well, it was a big deal, of course. And it really helped us grow really fast because we sold the coffee at $1.35. Remember, the coffee market was 40 cents.
Yeah, you said 40 cents. Wow.
This coffee was being sold at $1.35 FOB, so it was a significant, price for the farmers. And so once the word got out, that we were paying really good prices for coffee, everybody wanted to sell coffee to us. And so it was, I wouldn't say easy, but it was not that hard to start the business and really grow. And we were the only ones doing it as well. So it was, we were at the right moment, in the right place, basically. Right. So I guess we were lucky. I would say that, but there was a little bit of luck in it. Sure. But of course, I think the other part is that we did have a very disruptive model, and growers really caught on to it because we were actually paying what they deserved. Well, I think if I was to summarize it very quickly, I would say that we're a matchmaker. We find the perfect coffee for roasters and the perfect roaster for coffee farmers.
Yeah, how does that play out?
We're not your typical importer. Even though we have import companies in the UK and Australia and the US now, what we like to do is develop relationships. So let's say we're kind of like a Tinder for coffee, if you will. So we try to find the perfect match for that coffee farmer and the perfect match for that roaster, and develop those long-term relationships. Because in the end, what really matters to both parties is that you have a consistent and a reliable supply chain.
Right.
It doesn't help the farmer trying to find a new buyer every year. It doesn't help the roasters trying to find a new coffee every year. It's too expensive. So what we're trying to do is actually find those perfect matches, the perfect coffee for the roaster and the perfect roaster for the coffee farmer.
Got it.
Right? So it's as simple as that.
Playing matchmaker. That makes total sense to me. What is the ASECC? How would you sum that up sort of briefly?
Oh, that's ASEC. That's the Specialty Coffee Association that a few companies and individuals back about a year and a half ago we created in Colombia. Because Colombia has never had a real solid specialty coffee association like other countries. Like, for example, Nicaragua has had one for almost 20 years, and so has Costa Rica, and Panama has one. But Colombia had never had a specialty coffee association. There had been some trials back like 10 to 15 years ago, but they never succeeded. And so we were contacted, a few of exporters were contacted a couple of years ago by ACE, the Alliance for Coffee Excellence, the organization that does Cup of Excellence, because they were looking for an in-country partner to host the Cup of Excellence, because the FNC had decided not to continue doing it.
Right.
And so we had a few meetings with them and with a few members of the industry, the exporter side of the industry, and we soon realized that if we wanted this to work, we actually needed to get together and really create an association that could do Cup of Excellence, but also, do what other associations do, which is, really create foster development of the industry inside the country and outside the country, and get, all actors, roasters, exporters, growers, equipment manufacturers, baristas, and everybody together to really develop the industry. And we thought it was the right moment as well, because we were starting to see a lot more development in the specialty industry inside Colombia. So we got together about a year and a half ago in August 2016, and we created this association, which is basically the Asociación Colombiana para la Excelencia Café, which means the Colombian Association for Coffee Excellence.
Gotcha.
And so I was elected president a year and a half ago, and so I'm the president of the association, and we actually did our first Cup of Excellence in September of last year.
Alejandro, in the most simple terms, how would you explain how green coffee gets to a roaster?
I think the first thing that comes to mind when you ask me that question is that there's lots of hands involved in the process. Right. I would even start, from the cherry side of the equation. There's too many hands involved to get coffee to a roaster. There's of course the grower and his family. There's the pickers, which are a really important part of the chain, and sometimes people forget about them, but they're really important, especially when you're talking about specialty coffee.
Absolutely.
And then, in the case of Caravela, we have in origin 140 people, just making sure that we can get coffee from the farmer to the roaster the most efficient way and as consistent as possible. So there's lots of really hands involved, and let's not even mention or forget about the guys that are actually helping us pick up the bags. These are, in the case of parchment, 40-kilo bags. And then they have to, load in trucks, ship them from one place to another. Then the guys at the mill that are milling the coffee and making sure that the physical specs are. So it's a lot of hands involved, and in the case of special coffee, it's a lot of attention to detail. If you don't pay attention to any detail, even a minor detail, you can ruin the quality. And that's really important. How much detail and attention that every single part of the chain has to do to make, so that when the coffee arrives to the roaster, he or she can roast it. Most of our customers and most of the specialty industry still roast by hand. There's no computer really helping you roast. There's always a person dialing in the roaster and changing the gas flow and the airflow and whatnot. Right. So it's a lot of people involved, and so I talk to people about the industry as saying it's a people industry in reality. It's you can talk a lot about the espresso machine, and you can talk a lot about the roaster, but in the end, it's all about people. And that's the beauty of the industry, in my opinion, is that quality is a consequence of people.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with you.
And if there weren't passionate producers and passionate coffee professionals, there wouldn't be any specialty coffee. So in reality, for us, and this is something I've been saying for over a decade, is that there's no specialty coffee, but there is a specialty coffee people.
I like that. I might start saying that as well. How do you feel about how do you feel about that? I actually wonder if your answer to my next question, what are the most important elements in sourcing green coffee for a roaster to consider? I mean, we could get kind of philosophical here, but the people themselves kind of being one of the most important elements in the chain, right? Is the people themselves, because they're the ones who decide or maintain quality at all, right?
Absolutely. How I would respond to that is that what the most important element is finding the right people to work with. Because, a lot of people say they do specialty. And, these days there's plenty of people that do specialty. But in the end, it's all about finding that perfect match, right? It's finding that passionate coffee producer that when you visit him, you feel that he's improving his quality of life. He's improving his coffee. He's constantly thriving to do better, right? And finding, if you're working through an exporter, finding an exporter that shares that same passion and that really wants to do the best thing possible for everybody in the supply chain.
Yeah, so that it's a win-win, right? The idea of a win-win for everybody. Right, and we have always talked about win-win-win. Everybody needs to win. It's not only the farmer that needs to win. We all need to make money. And in the case of if you're working through an exporter, the exporter needs to make money because he's making a very important part of the industry and the supply chain. Right.
Because exporters most of the time, financing the farmer, giving him feedback. He's always there. He's there 24/7. At least that's what, if I were a roaster, that's what I would expect. My exporter partner should be somebody that it's there, that he's always present. He's always there for the farmer. Farmers always need a hand, somebody to talk to, ask him a question. What should I do about this? And so on. So really find people that you love working with. That's the most important element in sourcing green coffee. Whatever it is, just find somebody that you like working with.
We touched on quality. I want to go a little deeper there. Alejandro, how do you measure quality at Caravella? What are you looking for over there?
We're actually, we're a matchmaker, as I said before. So we're not looking for something specific. We're looking for that match. Sometimes a roaster is looking for, high acidity, very floral and citrusy coffee. But oftentimes he's also looking for something that, is a lot more heavy-bodied, less acidity, and probably, even, a lower price point. So Our job at Caravella is really helping roasters find the perfect coffee, and we're not just doing microlots because that's very nice. Doing microlots really makes your day, but in reality, what roasters and growers both want is somebody that is reliable. So if you're a farmer, for example, and you have not only a coffee you produce is microlot, not all the coffee is 88 or 90 plus, right?
Right.
You probably produce, a little bit of 83s, a little bit of 85s, a little bit of 87s, and a little bit of 88s. It doesn't help that farmer if you only buy the 88 plus.
Right, because he's still got to sell the rest of his coffee, right?
Right, and it's probably 90% of his production. You have to find that balance between quality and price for both roaster and for the farmer. And so what we do with Caravella is we commit to buying everything that our farmers produce from 83 to above. And the 83 is not paid at the same price as the 90-point coffee, but we strive to pay that 83 at a good price, at a good premium to market. And we pay the 85 at a different price, and the 86 at a different price, and the 87 at a different price. But we're buying hopefully most of what that farmer produces, so that he can feel that he's got a partner, that he's sticking up to him. And in the same token, roasters don't want just microlots. And that's also a fraction of what roasters sell. They want probably an 84 or 83 point coffee for a blender, or for cold brew or whatever, or for supermarket coffee. Everybody has their own outlets, and they want a good solid 85 for their espresso blend, for example. And they also want those single origins that they can sell in certain volume, because of course, printing a label and doing special bags for just a tiny amount is not very economical. So what we try to do is find those all this quality spectrum from basically 83, 84 and above, and try to get roasters to buy all the quality that a farmer produces from 84 and above. Just trying to make it efficient and a good business relationship for everybody.
So I'm starting to see that some of my questions down the list here are actually already answered by some of the things we discussed. For example, my next question on quality is, assuming a roaster knows how to taste and roast coffee, how does a roaster get consistent quality coffee from origin? And the answer kind of is this matchmaking relationship that you're talking about.
Sure. To complement what I've already said, it's also ticking up with the relationship. There's good and there's bad times with coffee and any agricultural product. There's some times where the quality is not there because it rained too much, or there was rust issues and so on. So you also have to find the balance. It's like when you're in your own personal relationships. There's good and bad times, but if you talk things over and you really find a balance for all parties involved, then you'll survive. The relationship will survive, and it's about talking honestly as well.
Right. Yeah.
In the end, it's a real long-term relationship that should drive the whole equation. It's phenomenal. The changes that happen and the speed where changes happen at origin are humongous. So you start to see that the growers really feel confident about the future, and so they start investing, and they start really improving, and you see that their house improves, and the kids can go to school and they can buy more land. And so it's really rewarding for everybody, because for the farmer, he now can trust a roaster anywhere in the world that is willing to buy his coffee and pay a good price for it. And for the roaster, it's like, hey, my sourcing has become easier. I now have this coffee that I can constantly sell in my shelves, and people will remember that coffee. So, I won't have to do that much marketing and promotion, because people will find it, that it becomes a staple in your offering. And so or you can make more money of it and create a following for that coffee. And so everybody's winning. And, talk about, sourcing chips, they become sourcing chips that are really beneficial, because you're really taking the time to really get to know the family and the people that you're working with. And so it becomes a really solid relationship that if both parties are really honest and the communication lines are always there, you basically have coffee for the rest of your life, and you won't have to, where I'm getting my coffee next year.
Right on. Yeah, that's that consistent and reliable supply chain you were speaking to.
Well, it becomes something that really happens, because, of course, the farmer will want to keep that relationship. So he's always focused on the quality. He doesn't have to worry about what's going to happen with my price. That's one worry less. He doesn't have to worry who's going to buy coffee. That's another worry less.
Right.
So what does he have to do? Concentrate on delivering consistent quality year after year. You take away the major big risks, right? So you're basically taking away the major risk that the farmer has. And so once you do that, it's all about worrying about the quality.
Right on. We have been speaking a lot to consistency, and so that leads me to my next question. So consistency is very important to roasters who want to provide that quality roasted coffee every time. How does a roaster identify a coffee importer, exporter who offers consistency?
Well, it goes back to the same issue, find those passionate and really, people you can trust and you can believe in. But also, if there's anything that we've learned that's really important to maintain that consistency is to have very good processes, especially quality control processes. Because if you don't have a good, consistent system of cupping and really making sure that what you're buying actually conforms or complies with your roasters, your clients' expectations, then it becomes hit and miss. So I think that's really important. Having also great cuppers, people that are good cuppers, people that are understand what the roaster is looking for, because every roaster wants something different. That's for sure.
No doubt.
No roaster wants the same coffee that his competition has. So everybody wants something different, and everybody has a different palate. So it's really finding a company that has good cuppers that are willing to understand what you want, not what they're offering.
Right.
Because that oftentimes happens. This is what I have. But our job as exporters and importers, what are you looking for, and how I understand what you're looking for, so that every time that I ship you a coffee, you're gonna like it.
Because there's nothing worse than shipping a coffee and saying that's not what I wanted.
Right, and or worse, you ship a coffee that's not consistently cupping. If you buy an 86, you'd expect all the bags to cup 86.
Right.
It's not helpful for any roaster to get an 88 bag, and then the next bag is an 84, and the next bag is an 85, and the next bag is an 83, and the next bag is probably an 80, and the next one is, wow, this is 90. That first of all, that doesn't help the farmer.
Right.
Because that means your cupping protocols are not great. And so you're giving your roaster a blend of everything, right? So you're not maximizing for the farmer. But for the roaster, it just creates a lot of issues, because, you don't want to have to adjust your roasting curves for every bag.
Right. I mean, yeah, ideally, you're right. You have that coffee that you're familiar with. It comes in and you're ready to roast it, and you know exactly where to start and, for the most part, what to do with it, right?
Mm-hmm. Right. And so, for example, Caravella, every single coffee that we export has been cupped at least 5 times.
Nice.
And we have quality control at the purchasing stage. We have quality assurance at our central lab, and we have quality assurance when the coffee arrives to the mill, before it's milled, and after it's milled. Make sure that at all single point, because coffee can change, the quality can change for X or Y reason. So you have to make sure that at every point that somebody's cupping that coffee and making sure that it's really conforming to the quality specs that your contract says.
Right. How many points do you know off the top of your head? How many points y'all check you cup the coffee?
So at least 5. So we cup it at the origin, the origin warehouse. So we're buying the coffee to the farmer.
Right.
Then a sample of all our coffee is sent to our central lab, where there's a quality coordinator that is making sure that the analysts are buying what they should be buying.
Okay.
And then there's another quality control when the coffee lands at the mill, because we work with satellite warehouses and cupping labs that are buying the coffee.
Gotcha.
So we want to make sure that the coffee that actually lands at the mill is the same one that was purchased.
Right.
So we check the divergence between the cupping score at the origin warehouse and our cupping scores in the central cupping lab and the mill.
Gotcha.
Then we cup it before milling. So we make most of the coffee that we actually export from all the origin that we work is blends, community blends. They're usually 20, 30, 40 different lots that we've purchased, which are supposed to be, A, which are 84s, 80 double A's, which are 85s, triple A's, which are 86, and so on. So we're making sure that all the coffee that has been bought as an A is actually an 84-point coffee. All the coffee that's a double A is an 85-point coffee, and so on. And so once we build the blend, we will have to make sure that, we're actually getting to, hopefully by blending 85s, we're getting 86 and a half, because that's one of the beauties of blending. And, roasters know very well how blending can really improve the quality or enhance the quality, I would say. And so we're making sure that before we mill it, once blended, they all are cupping great together. And then after it's milled, we do a quality control check every 20 bags.
Oh, wow.
So if you're shipping a 250 bag lot, that means that you're actually cupping 13 different samples from that lot every 20 bags. And we're also making sure that the quality specs of those 13 fractions are up to spec. We're not just taking 250 bag lot and cupping it.
Right.
We're dividing it in fractions and making sure that each fraction conforms in both in cup quality, cup profile, and physical quality. So it's a very intensive process, but it's really the only way that you can make sure that the coffee, when it lands and it gets to the roaster, those 250 bags are all going to be an 86-point coffee. All of them will be conforming to SCA, specialty grade specs.
Right.
And water activity, moisture, defects, cup score, cup profile.
So coming from a roaster perspective, then really when you're sourcing green, you need to be looking into sourcing it from somewhere that has regular sort of quality checkpoints, sounds like. And
also, great cuppers, passionate people that are, cupping the coffee and are being very honest, because, I think that's one of the things that also happens a lot is that, you go cup with them and, they're cupping fine with you, but then when you're not there, they say, oh, this guy will not notice that these 20 bags are a little bit lower quality.
Right. Yeah.
So there has to be that element of trust is very important. And so you really have to trust your exporter, importer, and he's actually, doing what he's supposed to be. And in Colombia, we have a saying, I don't know if there's a translation, there's a way of saying it in English, but it's gato por liebre, instead of cat. You're getting, instead of I don't know what the name of liebre is, but you're not getting what you paid for.
Gotcha.
And so that's very important, because a lot of the roasters are paying a lot of money, significant amount of money for and they expect to receive something of really high quality and consistent.
Now, we didn't mention this before, transparency. First question on transparency is, how do you define transparency in relationship to green sourcing? That's
a tough question, but I probably would summarize it as, doing what you say.
Okay.
So, and this applies to every single person in the supply chain. Not only for the exporter, it also relates to the farmer. Because, if you're paying a farmer twice as much as the market, you're actually expecting that farmer to be delivering coffee from his farm, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But that farmer could be buying coffee from his neighbor.
That's a good point.
And he was making a lot of money in return, because he's actually he's not producing it, he's buying it from his neighbor at the market price probably, and selling it to you at twice the market price. So transparency is at every part of the supply chain. And, banks have the KYC, know your customer, right? Transparency is also knowing who you're working with and knowing if the farmers that you're working with are really being transparent with you and honest with you. It relates to the exporter. Is he actually doing, is that coffee actually coming from that place and from those farmers? And is that exporter paying what he's supposed to be paying to the farmers? So it's really everybody being honest about the whole supply chain. And in the end, transparency is not like people say, I work with that farmer and I pay him X money. It's more about, generating that trust. Everybody in the supply chain needs to make money, but they need to make it transparently.
Right.
In the sense that everybody needs to win and everybody needs to make money, but not oppressing or hurting anybody at both sides.
Right. I guess the opposite question is, what is transparency not? What are bad examples of transparency? Because I know on the consumer side of things, at the roasting level, there can be all sorts of things thrown on a label on a bag that can be misleading, or even maybe a roaster is getting information they don't realize is transparent. So what are examples of bad transparency, or what do you think people consider to be transparency that's actually not?
What is bad practice in transparency? I would say that probably the worst bad practice is actually not paying farmers correctly. So, sometimes, roasters want to work directly with the farmer. And, it's happened to us in a number of times where, we've developed a relationship between farmers and roasters want to save some money. So they kick you out of the relationship.
Oh, I see. They kick the exporter, or is that what you mean?
Or the importer, or I guess. They go behind your backs basically and buy the coffee directly from the farmer. Of course, the farmer, he's probably getting the same amount of money that the exporter was paying him, but he's probably the roaster's actually not, buying it for less money, right? Because there's one less layer in the supply chain.
Right.
That's what happened several times to us, and it happens, you just have to continue doing what you do.
Right.
But I would say that's one of the back practices of transparency. For the sake of just saving some money, you're not being transparent with your partners.
Alejandro, I know that part of the conversation actually might be a little unpopular. Let's go there a little deeper if you don't mind. Why exactly is that bad? Let's kind of hash that out a little bit.
Well, because there's resources, there's money, there's investments made by the exporter that to develop those relationships. It especially in our case, we spend a lot of money being there for the farmers 24/7, 365 days a year.
Right.
Yeah, we're not just coming in every harvest, visiting them at the beginning of the harvest, saying, "Hey, I'll pay you this money," and then you get the coffee 3, 4, 6 months later, and then you come back a year later. We're there all the time.
Right.
So, I think as long as the relationship is working, you have to respect your supply chain, and so that's being transparent with everybody, understanding, and you might have an issue, right? Sometimes companies have bad days, a rainy day or a rainy year, and they can't buy the coffee, or they have to find something else because that coffee didn't sell. I would expect is you're being honest. You're telling him, hey, I had a bad year. I need to find cheaper coffee, or I need to find coffee from some other origin that is cheaper, or whatever, right?
Yeah, no, I got you.
Something that happens a lot is that roasters start to use the cupping table as a way to manage inventory, and that's not transparent. I'd rather have a roaster tell me, hey, I'm long, I can't buy the coffee, than use the cupping table, which I think should be sacred, to just tell you, hey, I can't buy the coffee. I don't have the budget. The coffee didn't sell well last year, so I need to try something else. Instead of, or hey, I'm long. It happens.
Right.
Just tell me I'm long. I can't buy it this year, or I can only buy half of it, or half of what I buy last year, or whatever. But transparent. They always. I think there's this conception in the industry that exporters are always the bad guys.
Yeah.
And importers are always the bad guys.
Right. So, yeah, that's definitely I've heard those words out here.
And honestly, that's not true. I think importers and exporters, for the most part, are doing a lot of legwork, a lot of time and money spent on really developing those relationships. So I would expect that there's complete transparency and honesty in our relationships. And I said before, you can have a bad year, you can have a bad day. That's fine. And I'd rather you tell me that you're long, you have these issues, than tell me that the coffee didn't meet your specs.
Right.
When we know very well that they have, because we go through a very rigorous process of cupping it. So I would say that that's really a bad practice that sometimes happens.
This is along the lines of direct trade, correct? Like, this is sort of, Direct trade is a hot word, at least uh, where I'm, where I'm at in the coffee world on the cafe side, roasting side. Direct trade is like everybody's favorite thing right now, and it has been for, I guess, 5 or more years.
I thought it was not popular anymore.
Oh, is it
a
not?
lot of companies. Well, I've seen a lot of companies stop using the term because I think it's become ubiquitous. Everybody uses it.
Yeah.
And so everybody's definition of directors is completely different from the other company. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I absolutely agree with you.
It's lost a lot of ground. It's prostituted itself.
Yeah. No, but I still see it on bags, and I still see people emphasizing it, and even in situations where I know that what they're saying isn't really it goes back to what you're saying about being honest. Like, when you're saying direct trade, what are people understanding you to be meaning? And then what are you actually saying? And it's not always the same thing. And I think that's what bothers me.
Yeah, we've avoided using the term. One thing, because, I don't think we could say that because they're working with us, it's direct. We are a middleman, and we're proud to be a good middleman. Yeah. So in an essence, if we would say this is direct trade, we're underestimating our part in the whole supply chain, right?
Right.
And so I think a lot of people, consumers, believe that they're the ones going out there and buying the coffee, and that underestimates all the people that are really making sure that coffee arrives safely and of good quality to a roaster.
Right.
So that's one of the reasons why we've avoided using the term direct trade. I think in the beginning it was a good thing, but as there was not an industry standard set up, and it was supposed to be self-verification, it really got misused by a lot of people. I remember back then, we were part of the whole direct trade movement, because if anything, we were basically back then, 2005, if I'm not mistaken, when the first time it was used by Intelligentsia. We were part of the first coffee that was labeled direct trade by Intelligentsia. We were instrumental in determining what was direct trade, but we were in the middle of it. And I remember that Intelligentsia did not specifically say that they were actually buying direct from the farmer. What it meant is that you knew the farmer, you visited the farmer, and you were negotiating with the farmer the conditions. So it wasn't just about buying directly from the farmer. It was that you had a direct relationship with the farmer, even though there was a middleman in between. But a lot of companies started using it more to say, hey, I'm buying from the farmer directly. And, there's very few instances where that really happens.
Right. But, my impression is that's what the consumers are thinking. So, that's a debate for another time. But there's just direct trade is certainly used in this day to mislead consumers of a roasted product into thinking that the roaster is, like you said, like having that rare actual direct interaction. But that's a whole conversation.
Yeah, that requires a lot of talking.
Yeah. Maybe for another series, huh? How about that?
Yeah.
All right. So Alejandro, let's end this with a bang on the conversation on coffee pricing at origin. This is something that throws me for a loop, throws a lot of people for a loop. I'm sure some of our listeners have a perfect understanding of how it works, but I'd say probably most of us do not. So let's jump into this with the question: how is pricing determined at origin?
Well, I can't speak for other companies, but I can speak for Caravella, and we've done a lot of analysis about cost of production at the farm level. Because for us, pricing really should be determined by how much it costs to produce coffee. That's a basic starting point. How much does it cost to produce specialty coffee at origin? And every origin has a different cost structure. So of course, Nicaragua is cheaper to produce coffee in Nicaragua than it is in, let's say, El Salvador or Peru or Guatemala. So for us, what is instrumental is that we set up price based on real figures, not on what that guy can pay. Because I think a lot of times you tend to charge roasters on their ability to pay, and of course you're always maximizing. So I remember the time when the Australian dollar was very strong. And Australian roasters were starting to travel the whole world and to search for coffee. And so the price for Australian roasters was, 10, 20% higher than it was for US roasters, because of course, they were Australian, they had money and they were willing to pay for it. So you charge them based on who you were. And to a certain extent, I think that also happened a lot for Japanese and Korean, Asian buyers. But we've tried to avoid that way of pricing. For us, I think everybody should pay the same price, FOB price for the coffee, and the price should be based on cost of production. So we every year we do a cost analysis of what we have a pricing model based on cost of production, and we basically take the cost of production, and then we have some parameters to define, what an 83-point coffee should be priced at, and so on. So depending on the quality, we have some tiers. As we have quality tiers, we have price tiers as well, which are based on those cost of production that we calculate. And one thing that we do, and this might be because I studied economics in college, we believe that nobody should pay the inefficiencies of anybody else in the supply chain. So what does that mean is that, if you're a small farmer in Mexico, you can't calculate the cost of production based on what that farmer produces. Because if you do that, then you'd probably have to pay 10 times more than you're actually paying. So
interesting.
Good example is Mexico. Mexico, an average, small producer in Mexico is producing 5 quintales per hectare. So that's 2.5 bags of green coffee per hectare. Yeah. And so, wow. And if you calculate the cost of production in a good way, that means including the cost of that farmer's labor, right? Because that farmer does not work for free and should not work for free.
Absolutely, right.
So you have to value his input and his time. And, generally what we do is we know that guy needs at least a minimum wage, the country's minimum wage, to live with his family. So you factor that in, and you divide by 2.5 bags, you're going to have to pay a lot of money, right? So that guy is being inefficient. And why is he being inefficient? Because, he doesn't fertilize, because he's having rust issues, because he has very little, productive trees, because his trees are old, or because he has renovated them, or because his distance between every tree is too wide. So, you have to take that away, because that shouldn't be the case. He should be trying to be as efficient as possible. You can't pay the inefficiencies of anybody. So what we try to calculate is how, what would an efficient farmer's cost would be. And, we already have that really well developed. So we know that, in Colombia, it costs you X, and then in Guatemala, it costs you about 10% more than it does in Colombia. In Nicaragua, it costs you about 10% less than it costs in Colombia, and so on. So that's how we create our pricing model. And so each origin has a different price based on those costs of production.
Gotcha. So, it sounds like a lot of legwork and research went into that.
It's just, we have the benefit that we have a lot of people on the ground. And so we have agronomists on the ground, and we have people that are working with the farmers. And so we get to see what it actually entails to produce a pound of coffee. But we also have, we're very lucky to have our own experimental farm here in Colombia. So we own a 3.5 hectare farm in Colombia, in Popayan, in Cauca. And we use that as experimental ground for us. So we have a few varieties grown, and we treat it like any other small scale farm would be. It's small, it's 3.5 hectares. And And so we have a farm manager, which is actually a guy that could be a farmer anywhere in Colombia. And so we provide him technical advice as we provide technical advice to any of our farmers. But he's during the harvest and most of the time he's alone in the farm. We don't visit him every single day. So because we want it to be very, very similar to what the usual farm operate, how our usual farm is operating. And so, but the good thing is that we have all the accounting for that farm because it's part of the company. So we have to keep all how much it costs to buy fertilizers, how much it costs for manual labor, picking, how much it costs for the administrator, how much it costs to water and all the things that you need, all the inputs that you need. So we have a good way of checking if our numbers, using our model, are very similar to our farm. So we have that way to compare. And we know that our farm is quite productive. Last year it was with only 5,500 trees in production. Our farm produced 40 bags of coffee. So in over a little bit over a hectare, we produce 40 bags of coffee, which is quite good. And we're not talking that we have hybrids that are really high yielding. We have most of what we have is actually Bourbon, which is it's a very good tree, but it's not the most high yielding tree in out there. So we already know that achieving 30, 40 bags per hectare is easy. I wouldn't say easy, but it's doable.
Doable. Gotcha.
In our model, we're working with not even 40. We're working with between 20 and 25 bags per hectare. So we're our farm is probably a lot more efficient than other farms. So we're working with a more conservative number in terms of yield, and the numbers we get, we've cross-referenced them with Ana Café in Guatemala and with El Consejo in El Salvador, and they say, "Well, I'm impressed because your numbers are quite spot on."
How that works now.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, and every year we update them, and what we're doing more and more is that every year we do a crop estimate in every country where we operate. And as part of that crop estimate, we not only count, the cherries to determine productivity and how much that farm will produce, but we also ask those questions like how much are you spending, how much are you paying your pickers, how much are you spending in fertilizers, and those things that help us build our cost model and make it more down to earth, if you will.
Sounds like a banker was involved.
Well, I do believe that your pricing has to be spot on. I don't know of any other industry that actually sells coffee based on market price. If you're a winemaker, or are you basing the cost of the bottle of wine on the market price? No, you're probably basing on how much it costs to produce it.
Right. Oh no, we're getting into the market conversation, the how the market works. Ruh-roh.
That's how it should be. I farmers, that's how it should be. You're price takers, and you shouldn't be price takers. You should be setting the price. That's how much I'm willing to sell my coffee for.
Price takers, and you should be price makers. That's the idea.
Right. That's the whole thing. But they don't know. So in my opinion, I think the first thing that we as an industry have to do is actually educate farmers on calculating the cost of production. And it's very simple. Like our model is extremely simple. And we've developed a really small, quick pricing model so that when we go to the farms, we can ask a few figures to the farmers and actually extrapolate using our model the cost of production for that farmer and show him where his gaps are. You're paying too much for this, or you're being very inefficient in this area. And so you have to work on these areas to make sure that your cost of production are as little as possible. So we're really working on that because I think the future of the industry really depends on farmers understanding what the costs are. And that may soon surely create some farmers saying, hey, this is not for me. I'm losing money and I'm not willing to put the time and the effort to make my farm productive. But hey, I think that's fair. If a farmer doesn't want to be a coffee farmer anymore, he can sell the farms to another farmer who's efficient, right, and is willing to put up the time and the money to make those farms productive. That in the end will translate into more sustainability for everybody, because there's a lot of coffee farmers out there, and that's one of the reasons why there's very little sustainability in the industry.
So Alejandro, thank you for your time and for joining us at the Coffee Podcast. Yeah.
That's great. I appreciate you having me, and I hope to be able to help you out in any other topics that you want me to give you a hand.
It was a pleasure having Alejandro on the show and really being able to back and forth with him on the topic of people and coffee, especially from the perspective of an exporter. Remember, you can subscribe to our email list and get some exclusive content and discounts. Just go to our website at thecoffeepodcast.org and you can find everything you need right there. The Coffee Podcast is produced by me, Jesse Hartman. Music is by Michael Parallax. You can find his music at michaelparallax.com. Thanks for tuning in, and until next time, happy brewing.